gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Jar President TV. I'm your host, Jar President, and it's been a good month since the last time I spoke to you people. First, let me get into my opening, okay? All right, recently it was discovered through the Dodd-Frank Amendment that the Federal Reserve secretly loaned out $16 trillion to the banks all around the world: Bank of America, Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, all the central banks around the world, basically, Bank of Japan, all throughout Asia and Europe. At the same time, the United States was negotiating a debt limit ceiling of $14.5 trillion with the Congress. And you think about yourself, how in the world can the Federal Reserve loan out $16 trillion to banks all around the world when we're right here in America, our debt is only $14.5 trillion? That's one of the beginning, okay? All right, now what I'm going to talk about now is the $16 trillion that the Federal Reserve loaned to banks all around the world. Citigroup received $2.5 trillion, Morgan Stanley $2.04 trillion, Merrill Lynch received $1.9 trillion, and Bank of America received $1.3 trillion. Now you ask yourself, how is it possible that these banks were able to get these zero interest loans from a private institution, the Federal Reserve, and to be able to walk away with trillions of dollars while they're impoverishing, foreclosing, and taking people's life away from them? Then how is it possible that they was able to loan out money to banks in Europe and in Asia? And at the same time, you have Greece defaulting on their loans. You have Portugal going through an austerity plan, or basically a structural adjustment. You have France. You have Germany dictate to people all around the European continent of what they're going to be basically under. Now, when you deal with the Federal Reserve, you always have to remember this is a private bank that gets to print currency and puts it into circulation. But the number one thing is they can put interest on it, usury. And now they're propping up all these financial institutions all around the world to basically take away your natural resources, your pension funds, your basic services, that's basically the running of your water supply, your electrical supply, your highways, your school systems, your educational systems, every corporation. These groups are able to loan out trillions of dollars, and yet the news didn't even mention it at one time. Now 16 trillion. I couldn't put that. I couldn't even calculate what $16 trillion looked like. I couldn't even imagine what $16 trillion looked like. But if I know that my government is $14.5 trillion in debt, and we have the bank that's basically our bank allowed to be able to loan money around the world, you ask yourself, why is this legal? Why wasn't the mass media talking about these types of things? $16 trillion loaned out to foreign banks. That's to let you know right there, people, they don't care about us. They don't care. You have these students that's in massive debt, $1 trillion in massive debt. You have the housing bubble and burst and inflated and burst, and you have mass unemployment. You have corporations leaving the United States, and you have our government in broke. You have the population as a whole broke, and yet you can loan out $16 trillion, and there's not a mention of it on the national news, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, CNN. They don't even talk about this. Now, the only reason we know this is because of the Dodd-Frank Amendment, which was basically the Financial Reform Act of 2009. It didn't do anything, but what allowed them to do was to hide this information for 2 years. Now, had the American people knew about this 2 years ago, do you think that the Tea Party movement would have been able to gain any strength? You think President Obama would be able to push forward all these stimulus proposals? Do you think that the Bush-TARP bailout would have made it through? No, it wouldn't have made it through. But thanks to the underhandedness of Mr. Bill Clinton getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act, And Mr. Bush coming in and proposing his massive tax reduction or tax plan for the wealthy in America in 2001 and 2003, or the massive increase of war funding. You always remember, the United States spends $2 to $3 trillion a year on our military, yet they spend less than $100 billion on our education. Now, I'm not no rocket scientist, I'm not no mathematician, but $2 to $3 trillion in defense spending and less than $100 billion in education, that should let you know right there the priorities of this great country that we live in. Now, Bank of America and Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, to walk away with trillions of dollars and not to be modifying people mortgages, not to even do a principal reduction where they just basically erase what you borrowed from them and just say, well, your home value has lost 50%, I'm going to reduce your principal on your mortgage. I'm going to reduce this loan 50%. You think they would have done that to help you out? You think that the legislation they passed through TARP and Obama's modification plan, you think that would have, been included in that to reduce the principal? Yeah, but it wasn't. And these same banks that profited or basically coerced the government into pushing these massive bailouts for them. Do you think the American people had known that this would have made it through? I'm of the belief that it still would have made it through because the politicians don't represent us. Those politicians go to these people. And these people get their money from a private bank, the Federal Reserve. So it's a continuation of a Ponzi scam. I'm not a Ron Paul supporter, but I agree in his philosophy of abolishing the Federal Reserve. I think once the states get control and allow banks to be owned by the state, and the money is printed from that bank that's controlled by the state without debt, without any interest and loan to every state, then I think we'll be able to start seeing a little bit of the light at the end of this tunnel. But as long as we continue to have a private bank, the Federal Reserve System, until we abolish them and allow the states to take control of its own currency and to issue debt-free money, debt-free, because there's nothing written that says that there has to be interest on this money. And for these children that's going to school, they have to take out the debt to finance their way through schools. It should be a crime. And since this is a Christian nation, interest should be a sin. It should be illegal for there to be any interest on this money because it's just paper. It's just printed out of thin air and put into circulation. We have to stop this, people. We have to stop this. Right now you have in New York, you have thousands of students, thousands of young adults sitting in on Wall Street. It's not made a mention of it on the news. And these young people have realized that the true runners of this country are Wall Street bankers who've profited handsomely from the last 35 to 40 years of deregulation. And ever since they abolished or changed the Glass-Steagall Act, their profits have skyrocketed. Again, interest has to be outlawed. And I'm not saying banks can't make no money. What I'm saying is the enormous interest that they're charging, the 25 and 30%, anything over 5% should be illegal. We're going to continue down this abyss of pure and unadulterated debt. We have to abolish the Federal Reserve. We're not going to get it out of Congress. We're going to have to take to the streets, people. And the little protest that's going on in New York, it's not going to be little for long because it's going to spread. It's going to spread like cancer. The people in Greece had the idea when they took to the streets. The people of England took to the streets when austerity was imposed on them. The people of Wisconsin took to the streets when austerity was imposed on them. It's only a matter of time for the population as a whole in the United States takes to the streets. So police officers, put your arms down. We're not the enemy. We're not the enemy because your pensions have been taken away by these criminal bankers and with the help of those politicians that continue to get reelected over and over because They done rigged the system to where money dictates who gets seen, who gets put on that ballot. People, stop electing these people. Get rid of all of them. You Tea Party people, quit allowing them to make you as a fool, because it's not for your interest. They're not talking about getting rid of NAFTA. They're not talking about getting us out of all these global trade agreements. They're going to continue to push this scheme of loaning you money at debt, at interest. And what's going to happen with us? We're going to continue down the abyss of serfdom and servitude. Thank you.